Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Maleficent, which was shown at the Cinestar movie theaters at Potsdamer Platz. The film was directed by Robert Stromberg, it was produced by Joe Roth, the screenplay was by Linda Wolverton, and it was based on the 1959 animated movie Sleeping Beauty, which was also based on the original Charles Perrault fairy tale, La Belle au Bois Dormant, known in English as The Sleeping Beauty in the Wood, and it stars Angelina Jolie, Sam Riley, Elle Fanning, Brenton Thwaites, Imelda Staunton, Juno Temple, and Leslie Manville. Now, I really adored the 1959 animated movie ever since I was 6 years old. It was a childhood classic of mine. It had beautiful animation, and my favorite characters, to be very honest, were Princess Aurora and Prince Philip, and also the three good fairies, King Stephen, King Hubert, and not to mention Maleficent. It was a really great film when I was a kid, and now as I grew up, I kind of see why certain people didn't really care about the 1959 Sleeping Beauty. And Rowdy C. from TV Trash and James Faraci from The Last of the Americans did a co-review on a blog form about this movie in particular. They pointed out the various flaws of the 1959 movie, such as Prince Philip being quite a worthless hero, and that the fairies have to be the ones to save the day and all of that, and Maleficent's petty reason of why she's become the greatest villain of all time. So yeah, there were some flaws as I grew up when rewatching this movie, but nonetheless, it definitely holds something special to my heart, especially when you watch it in French, since, well, the original fairy tale was written by a Frenchman, so just to watch it in French definitely made me like it even more, because it kind of felt more authentic to me, and I basically have a lot more fun hearing the characters speak in, well, Charles Perrault's native language. But still, the original 1959 animated movie by Disney, even though it doesn't really hold up as one of my most favorite films of all time made by Disney, it definitely has something in terms of how beautiful it looked, and in terms of, well, the technical side of what made this film great, like the usage of Tchaikovsky's music. But I'm not going to review the 1959 animated movie. As I said earlier, I'll be reviewing Maleficent, and I thought it was pretty good all throughout. Now, story-wise, this definitely won't be any surprise to anybody who's heard the story of Sleeping Beauty already and have both watched the 1959 animated movie and have also read the Charles Perrault fairy tale and even that of the version done by the Brothers Grimm. So I don't really need to tell the basic story of Sleeping Beauty because I'm sure you all know it already. But with this film, it's basically a deconstruction of how the story of Sleeping Beauty is told through the perspective of Maleficent. Yeah, I really expected it to go on the lines of Wicked, like how the Wicked Witch of the West became who she is. Well, I thought that with this film, I kind of perceived it to be how Maleficent became the way she is. I was thinking she might have had the same fate as Elphaba from Wicked. Like, she kind of feels so compared to the other fairies. She feels so inferior. She felt so this and that. But with this movie's case, she didn't really feel any sort of inferiority. In fact, when she was a child, this movie tells it that she was a free-spirited, very feisty, very free-minded young child who was so full of life and energy and at times full of curiosity, just like any other young and impressionable child. She was basically a very fiery and independent young girl who wanted to go around the world and just loved life to the fullest until she met one stranger who was Stefan, who was going to become the heir to the throne, but still had his simple background of being a farmer. And as years passed, they basically developed a romantic relationship with each other. Basically, they went from being friends to being lovers, but then because of King Stefan's duty to the throne, he had no choice but to leave Maleficent out of his life, which really caused her to walk to the dark side. It's kind of tough to really review this movie without spoiling anything, and it is pretty much a chore for me because, well, even though at times there are certain elements that were changed so much from the 1959 original movie, I guess I could really say I'm actually glad that it didn't really play it safe, that we were able to see the world that Maleficent is in and how she sees it, and we get to see her as the hero. Yes, of course. Maleficent is considered by a lot of people to be the greatest villainess of all time, and not to mention, she is a fan favorite to everyone who has watched the 1959 Sleeping Beauty and have instantly, well, loved her. Probably a lot more than the main protagonists, Prince Philip and Princess Aurora, and that's pretty much saying something. Besides, like I said, the only characters that I actually find nowadays to be very entertaining were the three good fairies, King Hubert, King Stefan, the mute servant, and also, well, Maleficent herself, because, well, she stops at absolutely nothing in the 1959 movie to really be the obstacle to Prince Philip. Yeah. But I will have to say this. This was definitely a pretty good deconstruction of the usual fairy tale that we all get used to and that we all hear about, and especially the twist near the climax, which I dare not spoil, but if you already know the fairy tale already, you probably might be in for a surprise. So yeah, it was actually quite interesting. Is it better than Wicked? Well, not entirely by a long shot. Because, as Animat said, there were certain aspects of Maleficent that kind of faltered compared to that of Wicked. Because the thing about it is, Maleficent was already an established villain in the 1959 movie. And with Wicked, it was quite interesting to get to know more about the Wicked Witch of the West because, well, yeah, she was a very feared villain in the Wizard of Oz movie. But this is the musical where we get to see probably more sides of her, of how she became this way. She was shunned by a lot of people. But with this film, we don't really see, well, how Maleficent was shunned. Of course, she was shunned by King Stefan, or willed to be King Stefan, but there was not so much tension with the other three fairies in this movie. They're basically called, um, they were not called Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather, but they were called something different. They were called Knotgrass, Flittle, and Thistlewit. Yeah. So there was not a lot of tension between Maleficent and the three good fairies as to why she became nasty. But there was tension between Maleficent and Stefan of how she became the way she is, and I thought it was quite interesting, but not fully fleshed out, nor at times fully realized, but it is quite interesting. And the whole question of King Stefan becoming this obsessive, Macbeth-like character was kind of a huge stretch, especially to die-hard fans of the 1959 animated movie. But still, in all fairness, the story basically felt like a deconstruction of the Sleeping Beauty tale that we are usually getting used to, and that we find ourselves getting used to. And it was rather quite intriguing at times. Though at times it could have been better in the writing department, I definitely have to say it was enjoyable from start to finish. I was totally glued to my seat. Now, the cinematography and the effects were absolutely flawless. I am not going to lie. The one thing that was quite off-putting is that the three fairies in their fairy form were basically like motion captured, and I thought it kind of looked a bit creepy because, well, they could have used their normal sizes and then just put wings on it and then just, been in their fairy attire, but with them being all tiny and almost appearing to be motion captured, I thought it was kind of a bit creepy. But the other effects managed to compensate for that. Whether it's the effects of the moors of where Maleficent and many other mystical creatures live, or the various action scenes with the various explosions that are occurring, and especially the building up of the spindle on the spinning wheel, I was definitely hooked because of just how flawless the visuals were. I mean, what more can you expect from a company called Disney? They're great with visuals. I mean, they're so on. Actually, they are absolutely the top tier players when it comes to making visual effects. Just like DreamWorks, just like many other studios like Blue Sky, or even that of Hayao Miyazaki. You can never go wrong with Disney when it comes to making such flawless and very dazzling visuals. You can never, ever go wrong with them. The visuals felt like they were absolutely gorgeous to look at. And sure, while I found the whole motion capture um, deal with the three pixies to be kind of off-putting, that can be forgiven because, well, the visuals and cinematography were flawless all around. It was just a visual feast for my eyes. And now we get to the characters, which are pretty much the bread and butter of this film. Now, yes, we all know that Maleficent was one of the most wicked and, dare I say, ruthless villainesses from Disney. And seeing her in this film as the title character, well, I have to say, it didn't just tell about her past, but how she was in the story. She basically becomes the hero at the same time the villain of the story. It was actually quite intriguing. Like I said, this is a deconstruction of how we usually perceive the story of Sleeping Beauty. And I understand why certain critics basically feel kind of off-putted by this because there have been a lot of other works that have been deconstructed very well. Like, for example, if you want a very comedic example, look at Shrek. That is basically a grand deconstruction of fairy tales where the ogre gets the princess and many other things. It's definitely recommendable to watch, and it's a lot of fun as well. Now, with Maleficent, I have to say, she was pretty intriguing as the main protagonist slash antagonist. It was really quite intriguing to see her relationship with King Stefan before he rose to the throne and before she rose to her own throne. So it was really quite interesting to see, well, through the creator's perspectives of how she was when she was a child, how she was in her teens, and how she was growing up, especially when meeting Princess Aurora. Hell, even Princess Aurora in this movie calls her her fairy godmother. And it was just quite wow. Kind of weird, but it's actually quite touching at times. I was easily quite sold into her character because even though I expected her to be cruel and ruthless, there were moments in the scenes of her youth growing up until she has her wings cut off by Stefan that I kinda had my heart going out for her, and it was quite sad at times seeing her wings being gone, and now that she has to go to the dark side and basically give the curse to Princess Aurora. And when she tries to reverse it, you could see the desperation in her eyes that she tries her hardest, but it can't really be ignored. And you could understand why she feels that true love's kiss probably may not work because she herself had experienced that through King Stefan and, well, kind of felt jaded already. So Maleficent in this incarnation was more than just a deconstruction of fairy tale villains and heroes in a dramatic sense, but she was someone I kind of liked. Sure, she's supposed to be nasty, but in this interpretation, I have to say she kind of got my heart, and it was really cool seeing her use those powers very, very well. And then we get to Princess Aurora. Yeah, Princess Aurora in the 1959 animated movie was nowadays not really so well received because people say that she didn't really have so much of a personality, she didn't really have so much of an edge, she was the damsel in distress and all of that. And here in this movie, I thought she was a lot better. She was basically a free spirit who was basically oblivious of her original identity as a princess. And when she sees her father, she hugs him, but then her father just locks her up. And I thought, wow, that seemed harsh, especially considering that you haven't seen your daughter for like 16 years. But still, I actually kind of like this version of Aurora, even though she doesn't have too much of a personality, but still, she's an okay character nonetheless. She's still enjoyable to look at. She's still enjoyable to kind of root for, even though I found myself rooting for Maleficent a lot more. But still, she's still quite young and still has a lot to experience about the world around her. And she's still quite fascinating. She's basically a curious and very bewildered young child, I might add. So she was able to have a little bit more personality, even though it's not really by a long shot, but still, she has her charms. And then we get to the three fairies, and let me just tell you, even though they do have their moments, I kind of felt that they were just thrown in as an afterthought because, well, like Animat said, he basically felt that they were basically like the Three Stooges, and I couldn't really agree with him more. There are times that their antics felt like what you'd usually catch in a Three Stooges short, or when you see the Three Stooges doing their thing, and they didn't really have a lot of depth, nor did they really impact me as an audience. And sure, their personalities could have been a lot better, but as comic reliefs, they're only okay, not really by a long shot. I could name a lot of better comic relief characters, but when you compare the incarnation of this movie's three good fairies to many other comedic characters, they kind of fall flat. I mean the three fairies. But still, they're okay, but nothing really home to write. Nothing really to write home about. They kind of fall flat as comical characters. I mean, there's nothing bad about them, but it's just that they're really goofy, for goodness sakes. And it's no wonder why this art incarnation of Aurora refers to Maleficent as her fairy godmother because she's pretty much someone who really knew how to take care of Aurora since childhood. And basically, she was so fascinated by Maleficent that she really wants to know more about her world and she wants to know more about her. And it was just kind of intriguing. A lot more intriguing than her interaction with her three good fairy godmothers. So, yeah, basically, they were just thrown in as an afterthought. I mean, the movie, sure, it still has the spirit of Sleeping Beauty if you include them, since they're the ones that gave the gifts to Princess Aurora. But other than that, they could have been written a lot better than just comic relief. And then we get to King Stefan, who in this incarnation is a very obsessive, tyrannical, and power hungry villain, or shall I say, a power hungry tyrant. He starts out okay. I mean, he had his first fling with Maleficent when he was a teen, but then duty calls and he's on the throne and basically wants Maleficent's head after his father tried to take her down, but he just couldn't. He now has to avenge his own father, and I do understand his motives, but it kind of feels like so much of a stretch to really make him a villain because, well, in the 1959 animated movie, King Stefan wasn't really an evil tyrant or wasn't really a power hungry tyrant. He was a generous, very sweet, very kind patriarch to his kingdom. And he had a very goofy moment with King Hubert, which I definitely laughed my butt off. Oh, and an interesting trivia. Back then, when I was a high schooler, I was a part of my class's play of Sleeping Beauty. And with our interpretation of the fairy tale, I basically play the grandfather of a young kid who is like the descendant of Prince Philip. And we basically got second place for best musical. So, yeah, random fact out of the way. It was a pretty good experience as a high schooler, but not really anything to write home about. It still had a pretty good memory in my heart, but yeah, there were many others that outshone it. Now that random fact is out of the way, well, going to King Stefan, here I kind of felt that he was played pretty well as an antagonist. If it's a standalone movie, yeah, he pretty much makes a good antagonist, but as an adaptation and as a retelling, it kind of feels like it's caught off guard because, yeah, he's a benevolent ruler in the 1959 movie, but in this film, why recast him as a tyrant? It almost feels rather uncalled for, but after all, this movie did need a villain. Anyways, it could have been someone else, but yeah, they basically had to go with King Stefan because there was a lot of tension with his encounter with Maleficent in the past. So yeah, even though King Stefan's character was very much a departure from the original 1959 animated movie and also from the original fairy tale by Perrault, he was basically a pretty fascinating antagonist. And then we have Prince Philip, who didn't really leave an impact on me. I mean, he was basically the boy next door, and nothing more to say about him. Yeah, Rowdy and the Last of the Americans did have a point. Prince Philip was a very worthless hero. I could see why not a lot of people care for Prince Philip other than he is just a good looking guy. Because all the fairies do the work for him. Yeah. So the only interesting and very likable character for me, well, definitely had to be Maleficent herself. The other characters were good like Aurora, but nothing really to write home about. Because, well, Maleficent was the only one who apparently took my heart and made me like her in this incarnation. The acting, I really have to say, was very solid all around, with Angelina Jolie being the great choice for Maleficent. Sure, many other actresses could have nailed this role, but my god, did Angelina Jolie nail her perfectly. She is totally up there with Eleanor Audley's performance in that role. And she didn't really feel like a copy and paste Eleanor Audley. She didn't really feel like it. She was her own creature altogether. Sure, she did get some of those mannerisms, but other than that, she was basically her own creature. This was her own interpretation of how she made Maleficent come to life, and it was just so gorgeous. Many critics and fans definitely praised her portrayal as Maleficent, even though they give some flack for some parts of the story and some other characters. But there was no doubt, no frickin' doubt, that Angelina Jolie stole the show as Maleficent. And if this movie ever gets nominated for an Oscar, I'm sure that she will definitely be nominated for an Oscar just because she really captured the role so well. She was able to capture that air of mystery, that dark, brooding, mysterious air, and not to mention her facial features were just so powerful. I mean, those cheekbones were just wow. It was just so thrilling watching her every moment on screen with her face just glowing with such a powerful presence and those glares that she gives. It was just as though that Maleficent came to life through her. It was just a thrilling and very magnetic portrayal of one of the most iconic Disney villainesses of all time, and my god, did Miss Jolie give such a an Oscar-worthy performance as one of Disney's most iconic characters of all time. Elle Fanning does a pretty good job as Princess Aurora. Sure, she doesn't really have a lot of material, but she was able to capture that sweetness and innocence that we usually see in Aurora. But there was kind of one thing that I asked myself. Why give her a British accent? I mean, it would have been okay if she just used her normal American accent, but I kind of see where they're going. Since this is set in Europe, why not let everyone have a British accent? Yeah. But it would have actually been okay if I would have seen her talk in her usual American accent, because that's what the 1959 Princess Aurora did, even though it did have a little bit of a British accent. But still, despite that little nitpick, I definitely really enjoyed her performance as Princess Aurora. She basically gave such an innocence and a naivete to a pretty iconic princess at the time. And she was absolutely great in that role. Then we have the three good fairies, played by Imelda Staunton, Leslie, oh yeah, Leslie Manville, and Juno Temple. Yeah, sure, their characters didn't really do anything for me, but their line delivery was spot on as ever, since Imelda Staunton was one of, and still is, one of England's prominent actresses alongside Leslie Manville, and Juno Temple is currently on the rise of becoming one of England's great actresses, and their chemistry together is certainly good. Sure, they do try their best given the material that they have, and they do try their best to make their characters come alive, even though I don't really care for this incarnation of the Three Good Fairies. But it's safe to say that I could really see that they had a lot of fun, and I guess that's what's most important. And then we have the role of King Stephen being played by Charlton Copley. And I have to say, yeah, even though he could have been another villain, like, why make King Stephen a villain in this movie? He definitely gave this incarnation of King Stephen a much needed sense of power, authority, and it was just a great portrayal of a very deconstructed King Stephen. And then we have Brenton Thwaites as Prince Philip. He did not have a lot to do in this film, but it's safe to say that at least he looked the part and he was able to give whatever material he's got and give it up pretty well. Sure, I would have wanted to see this character a lot more fleshed out, but as it was a pretty decent portrayal, even though I don't really care for Prince Philip as a Disney hero. But still, it was actually really good. Oh, and lest I forget about Diaval, Maleficent's pet raven, who she shapeshifts into a lot of different animals, especially that of a human. While in the 1959 original movie, Diablo was just a raven who basically talks with squawking left and right, here he basically can shapeshift into a human under Maleficent's powers, because it was actually quite an interesting backstory of how Diaval started being Maleficent's little steward. He basically started off as a stray raven who got caught by a farmer, but then Maleficent turned him to a human, and now he serves under her. And their frequent banter with each other was actually quite funny at times. He has some funny lines left and right, and I was actually cracking a smile every time he said his lines to Maleficent, and it was actually quite fun seeing the banter going on between them. It was just a hilarious moment that I do have with Diablo at times, and at times he's also quite the tragic character as well, because, yeah, he was a loner, but he was a free bird until he got caught, and now he serves under Maleficent, and he actually has grown to understand her world. Sure, he has yet to understand it further because of her experience in the past, but as he is as a loyal steward to her, I definitely say he's pretty charming. And he's lovingly played by Sam Riley, who I definitely felt was a pretty good actor in this character. He was able to give an air of sarcasm and a much needed likability to Diaval because, well, like I said, in the 1959 version, he was just a raven who squawked and basically served as Maleficent's alarm or messenger. But here, he's given a lot more to do, especially in his human form. And I definitely have to say that Sam Riley definitely gave such a sweet and very endearing portrayal of Maleficent's little henchman. And then we go to the music. Just like the effects, I was completely sold by the music. The main theme music basically uses a lot of orchestral pieces, which is very appropriate given the fact that this is set in a fairy tale. And it was actually really cool. And just like its various predecessors, like the 2010 Alice in Wonderland and many other action movies that were based on fairy tales, they basically make a great use of the music. And my most favorite interpretation of Once Upon a Dream was sung very hauntingly, yet very, very gorgeously by one of my most favorite modern music singers of all time, Lana Del Rey. I mean, oh my god, when she sang Once Upon a Dream, I was totally blown away. It was just so gorgeous. This was basically sung at the end credits, and I have to say, this is definitely one interpretation of Once Upon a Dream that I can listen to over and over again, aside from just listening to Once Upon a Dream in French, which I absolutely really like as well. So overall, yeah, I could really see why a lot of critics gave certain flack to this movie. At times, they kind of feel like there are some characters that felt maldeveloped, and there are times that the comedy is quite forced, given the fact that this movie is a dramatic retelling and reimagination of the classic Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. And some people feel like it was just fan fiction being shown on screen, and some people feel like it was kind of paling in comparison to the more superior Wicked. But as for me, I definitely enjoyed Maleficent from beginning to end. I don't really consider it to be one of the best movies that I've seen as of this year, but I definitely have to say it's pretty close, and it's very enjoyable whether you're a fan of Sleeping Beauty or not. This is a film that will either make you squeal with excitement or kind of make you disinterested. It has people really love this film, feel like it's okay, or kind of feel like it's below mediocre. As for me, I think it's a pretty good film, and it's a pretty well done retelling of the classic Sleeping Beauty tale, and also that of a deconstruction of what we usually are acquainted to when it comes to the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. And with that, I give this film a 4 out of 5 stars. Sure, there were certain elements of the film that could have been a lot better, but as it is, I definitely feel like it's recommendable enough for those of you who have watched the 1959 animated movie or have even read the fairy tale written by Charles Perrault or that of the Brothers Grimm. So go ahead and give this film a try. You probably may not be disappointed seeing that Angelina Jolie gave a very, very memorable performance as one of Disney's most iconic villainesses of all time. So anyways, what did you guys think of the movie as well? You're welcome to comment below, and you're welcome to leave any feedback. So, this is it right now. I'd like to thank all of you who have kept up with me. I'd like to thank all of you who've stuck with this review. And until then, this is Antoni signing off, wishing you all, well, have a nice day. And yeah, it looks like it's going to be back to hiatus again. But look out for my reviews from the 4th of July until somewhere in the first week of August, where I'll be reviewing a buttload of operas and concerts, basically from, well, Switzerland, the UK, Italy, Austria, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. So definitely look out for those as well. Until then, have a nice day, everybody.